Well, to discuss the developments of the last few hours, in fact, less than 24 hours, we are joined in by Pramit Pal Chaudhary, Head South Asia Practice Eurasia Group. Pramit, thank you so much for joining us. We are also waiting another guest to join us on ET Now today. But right now, what was playing was, Pete Hegseth, and he has mentioned how, they have functionally destroyed, Iran's missile program. Their navy is at the bottom of the sea. How accurate do you think is this claim and information given at the Pentagon address to the press earlier in the day today?
Well, given that we've just had complaints from the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, and I think Bahrain, that they have just been attacked by Iranian missiles against their oil and gas infrastructure, and the Iranian Navy issued a warning that any ship that attempts to pass through the Straits of Hormuz without Tehran's permission would be destroyed. It's very clear that the Iranians believe they still have capacity and have showed some capacity. Hegseth is probably right in saying that a large part of Iran's ballistic missile and nuclear program has been degraded or destroyed. But to say that it's down to zero or that Iran cannot cause at least damage to its immediate neighbors would probably be incorrect. It's very difficult to completely eradicate a country's missile program, especially if that country had been preparing for war, as the Iranians have, for the past several years. The reports we've received, or I've received, have been that the Iranians have learned how to hide a lot of their launchers. And so I think to some degree what Hegseth is doing is preparing the grounds for selling an American withdrawal from this war to the American public. It is true that Iran has no capacity to harm the United States, but it's very clear that in the region, Iran believes it is now going to come out in a very powerful position at the end of the war, and partly because it still has the capacity to control the Straits of Hormuz through military means.
If you look at it, the ceasefire is conditional to Hormuz opening, and which you had also briefly mentioned, Mr. Chaudhary. Tell us, is this 15-day enough for the complexity of that particular region, given, of course, the nuclear and the regional issues involved, or is it like probably a strategic pause right now?
It is a pause, but the point is that you're still seeing a ceasefire on the basis of negotiations that are still ongoing. So you have seen the Iranians issued a 10-point set of demands, including the fact that they would be allowed to charge dues on any ship passing the Straits of Hormuz. America said, no, Straits of Hormuz must remain open. And then President Trump has baffled everybody by saying that, one, the 10-point demand by the Iranians is something he can work with. Does that mean he accepts that the Straits of Hormuz should be controlled by the Iranians? And then he's also told somebody in the American press, actually, U.S. and Iran can both share the money from the dues, which would still mean that the Straits of Hormuz would no longer be an international open waterway. So for Iran's position, however, remains very, very clear and clear that this is going to be our straits, in many ways reverting to what it was before the Carter Doctrine was enunciated in the 1970s.
Mr. Chaudhary,
basically, it's still under debate as to what exactly is the final state of affairs when it comes to the straits.
Right. Mr. Chaudhary, we also have Adel Nazarian, who's a geopolitical strategist, waiting on the line with us. Let's just get her reaction. Adel, your reaction on, the official statement coming in from Pentagon, from Pete Hegseth earlier in the day on, some of the things that he mentioned was Iran begged, for the ceasefire. There is also claim that Iran's missile program has been functionally destroyed. Navy is at the bottom of the sea. So how do you look at some of these claims and the official statement that has come in from the Pentagon, and also your reaction to the 15-day ceasefire?
So, hi, great to be on with both of you. Thank you. This is a strategic pause. I don't see this war being over by any standard, by any means. This is just a recalibration. I think it's honestly an opportunity for the United States to strategically reload its military coffers. I do see this going forward, and I do see things escalating, frankly. It's a very fragile 2-week pause, by the way. It's very interesting because there are reports also coming out that despite the fact that the Strait of Hormuz has been, is going open again, I don't know if you've been reading reports, the Associated Press, different mainstream news sources have indicated that Oman and Iran have come to an agreement where they will be charging vessels that pass through the Strait of Hormuz about $2 million, I think it is. I think, and I've written about this on my social media, I do believe this is a way to keep oil prices high. Before, there was no fee for vessels that were passing through the strait. I frankly think that what we're going to end up seeing, this is a tactical reload. We have not seen the withdrawal of any U.S. troops from the region. And in fact, I think what this is really just, a chance for America to rotate carrier groups and assess the damage from Iran's drone and missile barrages on bases in Bahrain and Qatar. And I do see, frankly, boots on the ground is still very much a viable play. I think that whether it's
some of the statements that have
overt or whether it's
yes, and also some of the statements that have come in from the Pentagon, is it just optics? Because if US is truly in control, then why are they negotiating on Iran's terms?
Well, it's not negotiating on Iran's terms necessarily. I wouldn't trust also the, to be honest with you, this is basically a high stakes hostage negotiation. The hostages are the global economy and the Iranian power grid. And I don't think that it's complying with Iran's, points. I don't think the United States is going to compensate the Islamic Republic of Iran for damages done during the aftermath of February 28th of this year, where Khamenei was eliminated. I frankly think that this is just, Iran can't, unfortunately, the Islamic Republic can't be trusted. They say they're opening a Strait of Hormuz, but I would not be surprised if they actually do bar some ships, vessels from going through. If they, I don't know if they're willing to hijack them, but I wouldn't put anything past it at this point. So I really don't think that this is America capitulating at all, especially under Trump, to Iran's, 10-point proposal. This is not a Barack Obama or President Obama or President Biden administration, right? Frankly speaking, I think the U.S. has a hard policy of not negotiating with terrorists, however you want to put it. You can question that in some cases about what's going on in Afghanistan, what happened in, with basically giving an opportunity for the Taliban to come to the table. And also in Syria, where you have a former Al-Qaeda operative, Jolani, I call him, which is his actually nom de guerre, taking place. But anyway, the fact of the matter remains that this fails, in my opinion. In the classic 20th century diplomacy, a ceasefire was a cooling off period. In 2026, it's a logistical optimization window. And the bottom line is America is using this opportunity to position for a final strike, I think, on the nuclear program.
So we discussed, the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. We discussed the ceasefire. We discussed Pete Hegseth's comments. Now let's speak about the Lebanon exception over here. And I want to get your reaction, Mr. Chaudhry, on this. Prime Minister Netanyahu has clarified that the truce does not include Lebanon. Now, if Israel continues to strike Lebanon, which is considered as Iran's closest ally, isn't it inevitable that Iran will soon join this?
Not necessarily. Iran is a very hard, should we say, realpolitik player, and they have in the past not come to the aid of Hezbollah when they have other interests. In this case, I'm not too sure they can do very much about this. They can still carry out a few missile attacks against Israel, but they're no longer quite the Iran regime they used to be, in the same way that Hezbollah is much, much weakened. But I think what we're seeing right now is Israel making it clear, one, we were not part of these negotiations directly, so therefore we're not holding our security interests to whatever Pakistan or any other country may be saying. I would argue what we're seeing also now between the UAE, supposedly also carrying out retaliatory attacks in Iran, is basically saying the same thing. We weren't party to the negotiations, so it doesn't apply to us. The Pakistani Prime Minister, I should add, just 15 minutes ago, has publicly said violations of ceasefire have been reported at few places across the conflict zone, which undermine the spirit of the peace process, and basically urged everybody to sheathe their weapons. But obviously, we're not going to expect either Israel or the UAE to listen to what he says on this front. Israel will do what it wants to do or what it feels it has to do for its security. So I'm not at all surprised that this is happening. And this is part of the problem with the peace process that in many ways was not really negotiated in any real detail. Each country is going to make a call as to what it actually thinks is its core interests in this. And if at some point the peace process and the ceasefire doesn't make any more sense, they will break it.
Right. Right. Let's get Adele's reaction to, this entire whole nuclear solution. Is it real or rhetorical? Because, President Trump, I'm reading, claims that U.S. will dig up and remove the enriched uranium. But earlier in the day, Hexet warned that U.S. will take it out if not handed over. Now, since Iran has not publicly confirmed this condition, do you think it will be a signed agreement going forward, or is it already?
I think there will definitely be a signed agreement at some point. I don't think it's going to be possible to completely disarm Iran. I think you can't disarm any nation, to be frank with you, that has nuclear capabilities at this point. I think we've gone past that. And, just to go back to the piece about, if I may, sorry, I'll go back to the nuclear arm decision. Basically, I think with President Obama's Iran JCPOA deal, that was very poorly negotiated. America basically, unfortunately, was negotiating from a place of weakness and capitulating to the Iranian regime, the government back then. I think in this case, it's going to be the U.S. strategically negotiating from a place of greater strength. But it remains to be seen who will be the next leader of Iran. Is it going to be a continuation of the Islamic Republic? Is it going to be someone who's seen as a reformist like Rouhani? Will it be someone who's completely coming out of, let's say, left field, who is a lesser known figure, who is more on the populist side of things? That's going to really determine how and when a new deal will be signed with the United States. But I have to say also, regarding the exclusion of Lebanon from this, I think it's actually a brilliant, siege with the PR department, so to speak, the ceasefire. This is essentially Israel's way of disabling one of the strongest arms of the IRGC and Iran, Hezbollah. And so I think it's really, really fascinating to see how this is going to unfold, because you have basically Iran agreeing to the ceasefire while their arm is basically being ripped off in terms of Hezbollah, and they really can't do anything, or they'll be called as breaking the truce. So asymmetric peace, and this has been done historically, by the way. It's not the first time it's happened, and it's an asymmetrical war of peace, and so war, so to speak. So
Yeah.
there's so much going on here. But if I can say one thing, I think really 2026 is going to be laying the foundation for the bigger war, which is probably going to erupt in 2028. And
Right.
is going to involve the complete, basically, demolition and rebuilding of the global economic system. That's what I see happening.
Right. Let's get final word from Pramit Pal Chaudhary over here. Many are arguing that this is US's desperate attempt, after all the pressure that it is facing back home, its own pressures, including the high fuel prices, used up defensive resources, and of course the protests that were happening over the past couple of weeks. So do you look at it as an exit strategy for US out of this West Asia war that it put its hands into?
Kind of depends really on one man, which is President Trump. There are sometimes he seems to signal that he would really like an off-ramp on this war. And then sometimes he signals that, no, I'm completely committed to staying the course here. And I think in many ways it's really boiling down to the Straits of Hormuz. This is something America has been a core component of a cornerstone of American Gulf policy, going back to the Carter administration. And there is a bit of Trump, and I think a lot of his aides are saying, look, you can't be the man who walks back away from this. But yes, there's also a group of political advisors who are saying, we have midterm elections in November, your polling is weak, the price of gas at the pump has always been dangerous for any American politician. Is this war worth it? And Trump seems to go back and forth on this front, and I have to admit, I'm not certain where he's going to fall in the end.
Right. Thank you so much, Pramitpal Chaudhary and Adele, for joining us today on ET Now.
Thank you.
Well, it is time for us to slip into a very short break on India Tonight. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more news on the other side.